rappeler à l'attention de notre commission un problème caractéristique de notre époque.
Effective comme ressource matérielle. Et l'on comprend parfaitement qu'elle appartient aux époux et aux seuls de décider, selon leur conscience, combien d'enfants ils devront avoir et quelle devront être leur régularisation des naissances. Or, s'il est un domaine où aucun tierce ne doit pénétrer, c'est bien celui de l'intimité conjugale. Par conséquent, les droits des familles à recevoir des renseignements et des conseils et bénéficier des services de santé qui seront institués à cet effet doivent avoir plus de données statistiques que celles dont on dispose actuellement. On doit faire les recherches scientifiques beaucoup plus systématiques et beaucoup plus poussées dans des domaines encore mal connus. La promotion féminine est en fait le problème qui nous concerne tous, car de sa réalisation dépend l'avenir de l'humanité. Le monde sera plus pleinement humain, accédera davantage aux valeurs de l'amour, de l'affection, de la tendresse et de la fidélité dans la mesure même où la femme jouera son rôle dans une société encore trop livrée à la violence. Le statut social de la femme est
le respect et l'observation universelle des droits de l'homme et des libertés fondamentales pour tous. Remarquons bien, pour ceux qui préoccupent la deuxième commission,
说的话也够多，但是这并不是目的，这并不够。我们现在所需要的是项目第3、第4项中所讨论的长期统一实施的办法。这是一个巨大的工作，它需要各国政府跟国际机关在各个阶层上协同努力。这种努力要求成功的话，必须有所有男女人士的承认跟参加。但是这种方案能够配合经济的加速发展，同为必要的。因为现在我们太多的国家过于重视经济的发展，而忽略了社会的发展，尤其是关于促进妇女地位方面，那么我们所需要社会发展的方面非常之多。比方说，更多的、更好的国民住宅，更多的、更好，在我们现阶段的社会政策之下，我们政府2年以来
by permitting the women to participate actively both in the urban and rural areas, as well as from the highest to the lowest levels of society, in the social, economic, and political development of member states of the United Nations. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gracias de nuestra agenda.
Okay.
Interview, Mr. Ganji U N. Take 2.
Sir, you have submitted to the first committee of this Human Rights Conference a report on apartheid. I wonder if you could give us a very brief outline of this report.
Yes, the report is concerned with the condition of human rights in South Africa, Southwest Africa, and Southern Rhodesia. The basis of examination of law and practice in South Africa in the report is the Articles of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The documentation used in the preparation of the report, practically all the documentation is South African government's official publications, laws, regulations of the government of South Africa or Southern Rhodesia, prevailing in Southern Rhodesia or Southwest Africa. The study for each of the 3 territories starts out with an introductory chapter which deals with the system of government. Then it is concerned, there is a chapter on the rule of non-discrimination. what has been of main concern to me in the preparation of the report has not been the extent to which the law or practice in South Africa does not conform with the articles of the declaration, but rather the extent to which, no matter what law or rule or regulation the South African government has established, that law is applicable to all citizens, irrespective of race or color. So it is in fact a comparative study of the application of the international rule of non-discrimination. Unfortunately, although, as I said, the documentation is the official publications of the government, that one can't deny these facts, the situation looks very gloomy. And in fact, it draws up an ugly face of conditions to which the African majority, the Asian and the so-called coloreds have been forced to accept in their own countries. In particular, I may call attention to the question of freedom of movement and residence. As you know, 87% of the territory has been reserved for the European population, and it is only 13% of the territory in South Africa, 13% of the land which is not really the best of the land to be found, which is in the 13% you don't find any major mineral resources such as diamond, gold or coal. That is reserved for the African population. Their mobility is controlled severely. An African cannot leave the reserve without the permission of the Bantu Commissioner. He may leave the reserve provided he has an employment outside of the reserve in one of the cities or in one of the farms. When he gets to the place where he has been employed and for which he has got permission to leave the reserve, and in case he does not like the job that he has been offered, he is forced to comply with the terms of the contract. Mostly in the case of farming, the agricultural workers, they cannot leave the job that they have accepted. They cannot leave it without fulfilling completely the terms of contract. In case they leave before the contract expires, they are subject to fine and imprisonment. And after they serve the sentence, they are again to serve the same employer who had signed the contract of employment with them. The condition as regards the right of education is unbelievable. As you know, in South Africa, in Southwest Africa, and in Southern Rhodesia, there are separate schools for various race groups. The standards are very low. The Africans are not really, the education that they are receiving, whatever they are receiving, is mostly that which was, should have been given maybe, or would have been given 200 years ago, 150 years ago. They are not being prepared at all for modern life. There aren't training schools to train labor, African labor. Therefore, when you see the wage differences between the Africans, Europeans, and mostly Africans, Asians, and Europeans, you see that the African performing the same job gets 1/6 of the salary that his European counterpart gets. The condition of housing is deplorable in reserves as well as in urban areas where the Africans have been brought for the purposes of serving the industry. The removal, government takes actions, arbitrary actions against the African population. Just recently, as I was saying, as an instance of conditions to which the African population, more so than the Asians, is subjected to, I may recall that very recently the government decided to remove 12,000 Africans from NATO to relocate them in Lime Hill. These individuals were forced to leave their homes that they had occupied for generations in certain cases. The condition is deplorable.
Sir, there have been numerous resolutions by the General Assembly as well as the Security Council. There's a permanent committee at the UN investigating the situation in Southern Africa. What more can this conference do to help improve the lot of the population in Southern Africa?
Unfortunately, I think that the public opinion in general throughout the world does not understand what apartheid means and what condition of life it portrays. If the public opinion were to be brought to understand what the situation is, how deplorable it is, how inhuman it is, I'm certain that public opinion, mostly in the Western countries, will bring pressure to bear on governments who could be instrumental in bringing some kind of pressure, effective pressure, on the South African government to desist from this kind of policy.
Thank you very much.
Parenthetically, Mr. Chairman, it is observed from the Tehran Journal of today's date that we have not begun to explore the possibilities of the techniques of publication and publicity in this age of mass communication, at a time when mass persuasion has become a science. Can we really say we are using all the resources at our disposal to engage the conscience of the world in the struggle against apartheid? In the countries whose policies help to perpetuate and strengthen the regimes of Southern Africa, how many people really understand what apartheid means? And, Mr. Chairman, until they do know, until they are willing to make their own personal sacrifices so that this monstrous ideology can be destroyed, their governments are unlikely to move in the direction we want. This is a fact of life, but a fact of life which we can surely manipulate to our advantage. To provide the resources for the kind of program we need, we shall have to go beyond the resources of the United Nations and its member governments, for all of us know the limits of those resources. We shall have to appeal to organizations, to institutions, and to individuals, not with the kind of generalized appeal we have made in the past, but with concrete and specific programs which we ask them to carry out. Mr. Chairman, my delegation recommends that the United Nations should now establish a fund to be contributed to by governments and private interests in all parts of the world in order to finance a sustained program of information and publicity on apartheid. This program should be directed at the average citizen inside South Africa and in each of the countries which by economic cooperation with South Africa are indirectly supporting its disgraceful policy. In the United Nations too, Mr. Chairman, there are measures we must consider and consider as a matter of priority. To take again an example, one of the areas in which a situation that was bad to begin with is daily growing worse is the harsh and brutal treatment meted out to freedom fighters who are caught. The United Nations has recognized the legitimacy of their struggle. Is it not time for the United Nations to demand that they be treated in the manner prescribed for all other prisoners of war? Ours is a just struggle, Mr. Chairman, the same struggle that they, the freedom fighters, are waging. It is just because its object is not to wreak vengeance or to exact retribution from the white people of Southern Africa for what has been done. The objective as the special rapporteur has pointed out, is to create a genuine non-racial society. In Jamaica, Mr. Chairman, our national motto is, out of many, one people. That motto represents an article of faith, the absolute conviction of our small and young nation that no nation can achieve its destiny, social, economic, cultural, civil, or political, unless all the races and peoples who form the society are equally free to contribute to that achievement and to share in its benefits. Because of this conviction
in general and of the policy of apartheid in particular. As we all know, this problem has been discussed in the General Assembly and other United Nations bodies for many long years. And I should like to take this opportunity to pay high tribute to those bodies for their hard and devoted work over such a long period of time. The government of South Africa, however, despite earnest appeals repeatedly made by the United Nations and many governments, including that of Japan, still persists in policies of racial discrimination that virtually all of the rest of the world vigorously condemn. This is a matter that all men of goodwill must regret profoundly. We in Japan feel that it is a cause of great and deep frustration. But this frustration should not lead us to defeatism. I am firmly convinced that if we persist in the course that we know is right, with patience and determination, our cause will prevail in the end. The day will certainly come when the indigenous people of South Africa and Southwest Africa, Southern Rhodesia, the Portuguese territories in Africa, and all other territories under the colonial yoke will come into the full enjoyment of their human rights and the fundamental freedoms, including freedom from racial discrimination. I think it is
rappeler que d'après notre expérience, c'est-à-dire les succès obtenus jusqu'à présent dans notre pays, l'émancipation de la femme fait partie intégrante du progrès social général. Voilà le point de départ pour aborder toute question concernant l'émancipation de la femme. Il est vrai que toute conquête dans le domaine social se traduit sur le plan juridique. Un statut juridique de la femme qui lui confère l'entière égalité en droit est une condition sine qua non de tout progrès en cette matière. Dans mon pays, ont été entièrement et pour toujours liquidées les racines de l'inégalité et d'oppression économique et sociale des femmes, le principe de l'égalité en droit entre hommes et femmes est d'ordre constitutionnel, concrétisé dans un code de la famille, qui est avant tout un code de la femme, de la mère et de l'enfant, et complété par d'autres lois. Mais le statut juridique, pour accomplir son rôle, doit être complété par un statut social qui assure effectivement à la femme l'égalité avec l'homme. À cette fin, il faut étudier les modifications qui doivent être apportées à la vie économique pour permettre aux femmes l'accès aux emplois et professions, de telle sorte qu'elles puissent avoir aussi le temps nécessaire pour participer à la vie politique et sociale. Il serait souhaitable une participation dominante des femmes dans certains emplois, tels que les services sociaux, l'enseignement, art, culture, prévoyance, assistance sociale, assistance médicale. Chez nous, le nombre de femmes domine dans ces branches surtout. Mais l'accès des femmes aux diverses professions implique un système de formation des cadres féminines, l'instruction nécessaire, l'enseignement, etc. Toutes ces mesures doivent réaliser une concordance qui doit exister.
Je vous remercie.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra el distinguido representante de Australia.
Mr. Chairman, I speak with some diffidence, having listened to the many speeches of the distinguished and eloquent ladies who are naturally more knowledgeable in this field. Yet my delegate had the privilege recently of being a member of a drafting group which was set up by the Commission at its 20th session in 1967 to work on the then draft declaration on the elimination of discrimination against women. My delegation considers that the use of technical assistance and the advisory services programs play a vital part in promoting women's rights. Seminars to discuss particular subjects are of great importance, and Australia participated in the United Nations seminar held in Manila in 1966 on measures required for the advancement of women, with special reference to the establishment of a long-term program. The Australian delegation is appreciative of the work of the United Nations Secretariat and for its excellent documentation of information in this field. As we have already said in the plenary session, we are keenly aware of the importance of teaching and education and must commend the part that the organs of the United Nations have played in this respect. As the agenda item specifically includes a reference to the unified long-term United Nations